Hello and welcome to this Astranti video. Today we'll be looking at the topic of intangible assets. In this video we'll define what intangible assets actually are, as well as exploring how they can be immensely valuable for businesses. This is an extract from our video on Chapter 10 of the BA3 course, but this will also be useful for those of you studying for F2. If you want to see the full video and view our full range of resources for BA3, they can be found on the Astranti website. And if you needed further encouragement, all of our CIMA certificate resources are absolutely free to access. But for now, let's jump in and get to grips with intangible assets.
We're going to start by developing our knowledge of what intangible assets actually are in a little bit more detail. So you should be aware by now that assets can be either tangible or intangible in nature. And tangible assets are assets with a physical presence. And so these can be things such as buildings, cars, cash. They have a physical presence that you can actually touch. Intangible assets, however, are things that are controlled by and make money for a company. However, crucially, they have no physical presence, and as a result, they are much harder to quantify financially. And so a really good example here would be something like a patent or a company's brand. Both of these things make companies money. However, they don't have a physical presence and they're quite difficult to quantify financially. So to develop the idea of intangible assets a little bit further, I'm going to introduce you to the definition of intangible assets as per IAS 38, which is of course the reporting standard for these assets. And you should be able to see this definition on the screen in front of you now. I'm not going to read through this definition word for word, so what I'd suggest you do is pause the video for a second and just familiarise yourself with it if you're not so already. What I am going to do, however, is pick out some of the key aspects of the definition which are really important for you to get your head around. And you can see these highlighted in pink on the screen at the moment. And the first one of these is that intangible assets are assets without physical substance. And this is a defining characteristic of an intangible asset. The fact that it has no physical presence. You can't reach out and touch and pick it up in the same way that you could a piece of stock, for instance, or that you could touch a car, which is of course a type of non-current asset. If you think about an intangible asset such as a patent, it has no physical presence. You can't reach out and touch a patent and feel it in the same way that you could do your car, for instance. The second key aspect of this definition I'd like to highlight to you is the fact that intangible assets are resources that are controlled by an entity. And control is really important in terms of who controls the benefits stemming from an intangible asset. So, if you think about copyright, for instance, it is generally speaking the musician themselves who owns the copyright on the music. And so if anyone wants to use a sample from the music, for instance, or cover a particular track, then they will have to sort this out with the musician who owns the copyright on the music in the first place, as they control the benefits from this intangible asset. The final aspect of this definition I'd like to highlight to you is the fact that future economic benefits must be expected from the intangible asset. And these future economic benefits must be both evident and also probable. So for instance, a patent on a groundbreaking new piece of technology is obviously highly likely to provide the entity that controls the asset with a huge amount of economic benefits. The patent on a charcoal-flavoured energy drink, however, is unlikely to be as popular and is therefore unlikely to be as economically beneficial to the holder of the patent. So we've established what an intangible asset is. But why are they so valuable to the companies which hold them? Well, that is what we're going to look at in the next section of this video. Well, one of the main points to note about intangible assets and the value that they bring to companies is that they can provide the company which holds them with significant market advantages. And as such, intangible assets can have a critical impact on the long-term success or failure of an entity. This impact on long-term success is reflected by the fact that it is tangible assets which do more to increase the current worth of a business. So for instance, a factory or a piece of machinery producing stock for a company is producing something which will be sold immediately to increase the current value of the business. Intangible assets, however, increase the future worth of a business. A company's brand, for instance, doesn't give it an instant payout. It will, however, if this is developed over a period of time, lead to a long-term growth in the worth of a company. A final key point for intangible assets is that although they can provide significant long-term advantages for companies which hold them, they can also very easily be destroyed. And this can be down to things such as excessive carelessness on the part of a company or a bad reputation of a company. And a really good example here would be BP and the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The bad publicity surrounding this oil spill had a significant impact on BP's reputation and caused the company serious harm. In fact, the company's share price dropped by half in the 2-month period following the oil spill. Although the company has taken significant steps to rebuild its reputation now, this is a prime example of how easily a company's reputation can suffer and then how difficult it can be to rebuild this reputation afterwards. One further point to note about intangible assets is that there are 2 sub-classifications of this type of asset which you need to be aware of. And these are definite and indefinite intangible assets. And so we're going to look through each of these sub-classifications now in a little bit more detail. So let's start with definite intangibles. And definite intangibles are contract-based assets. Essentially, they have an agreed-upon expiration date. So a really good example would be the cross-licensing deal between Google and Samsung. This deal was signed between the 2 companies in 2014 and reflects the fact that both of them are the primary backers of the Android operating system for mobile phones. And as primary backers of the Android operating system, the 2 companies decided on this cross-licensing deal in an attempt to strengthen their position within the smartphone market. This agreement didn't include the transfers of any patents between the 2 companies, but what it did include was an agreement to improve research and development collaboration between the 2 companies for current and future products over the next 10 years. This is a contract which has a limited lifespan, and so is an example of a definite intangible. This is contrasted with indefinite intangibles. And indefinite intangibles are assets that have no limiting factors on their useful life. As there is no foreseeable limit to the benefits generated from these intangible assets in terms of financial benefits, generally these intangibles are not amortized. And amortization is something we will return to later on in the video. And a really good example of an indefinite intangible asset would be a company's brand. So something like the Big Mac brand at McDonald's. There is no limiting factor on the useful life of this Big Mac brand. Essentially, as long as McDonald's keeps operating and keeps this Big Mac brand intact, then it will continue to be an asset to the company and will continue to provide them with money. As it is indefinite in nature, it will therefore not be amortized, as it has no end to its useful life.
So that brings us to the end of this video on intangible assets. If you found it useful and want to see the full video, this can be found for free on the Astranti website as part of our full range of CIMA certificate resources. If you've enjoyed the video, why not subscribe to one of our social media accounts? We can be found on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and of course here on YouTube, where you can find many more videos on a wide range of topics. Goodbye and thanks for watching.